the Maryland Correctional Institution in Baltimore, Maryland, descended into chaos when a corrections officer discovered the body of inmate Jelani Hightower during a 6 a.m. routine check. Jelani, a 32-year-old serving a 5-year sentence for drug possession, lay lifeless on his bunk in cell block D, his throat slashed and torso riddled with stab wounds, 14 in total. Blood soaked the concrete floor, and the cell bore signs of a savage struggle, shredded bedding, a toppled stool, and smeared handprints on the wall. The officer immediately secured the scene and alerted the prison security team, triggering an immediate lockdown of the facility. Detective Keyshawn Jakes, from the Baltimore Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, arrived to lead the investigation, coordinating with prison officials to preserve evidence. The prison warden, Marcus Phillips, granted investigators full access to the facility's records and security protocols. Initial examination by the medical examiner suggested Jelani had been dead for 2 to 4 hours, with early rigor mortis evident. The time of death was estimated between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Forensic teams collected blood samples, fingerprints, and a broken toothbrush shank discovered near the body, suspected as the primary murder weapon. The makeshift weapon appeared to have been fashioned from commissary items available to inmates. Detective Jakes interviewed the night guard, Darnell Tinsley, who had been on duty in cell block D during the overnight shift. Tinsley reported hearing muffled noises around 2 a.m. but dismissed them as routine prison sounds. He noted that Jelani's cellmate, Terrell Lyman, a 29-year-old serving 8 years for armed robbery, appeared unusually tense during the morning check. "I did my rounds at 2:15, and everything seemed normal," Tinsley stated in his official report. "Nothing that would have raised any alarms." Terrell Lyman was immediately isolated and questioned. He claimed he slept through the night and woke to find Jelani dead, vehemently denying any involvement in the homicide. When pressed about the implausibility of sleeping through such a violent attack in the confined space, Lyman maintained his innocence, suggesting that he was a heavy sleeper due to medication. "I take prescription sleep aids for my insomnia," Lyman told investigators. "I didn't hear anything. I swear I didn't do this." Prison records confirmed Lyman had indeed been prescribed sleep medication, but the dosage was relatively low. Surveillance footage from the hallway outside the cell showed no entry or exit during the night, supporting the theory that the perpetrator was either Lyman or someone who had access before the cell doors were locked for the night at 10 p.m. Jelani's mother, Tamaria Fulton, was notified of her son's death by prison officials. She expressed shock and stated she had no knowledge of any threats against her son inside the facility. Jelani was keeping his head down, just trying to serve his time, she told Detective Jakes in a tearful interview at her East Baltimore home. He was planning to get his GED in prison and had been attending counseling sessions. "This doesn't make any sense." Detective Jakes and his team began examining Jelani's recent communication.
Youngsters, you hear that? You can go there for a 2 to 4 bid and lose your life, youngsters. So think, youngsters. Think before you move. Don't get caught up in the web, youngsters. It's easy to get in trouble, hard to get out.
Detective Jakes and his team began examining Jelani's recent communications and prison interactions. They discovered that Jelani had made 3 phone calls in the week prior to his death, all to his mother. The investigation launched with a primary focus on internal prison conflicts, as the sealed facility pointed to an inmate perpetrator. Prison gangs became an immediate avenue of investigation. Warden Phillips provided investigators with Jelani's complete prison record, which showed the inmate had been involved in a minor altercation 3 weeks earlier in the prison yard. The incident report indicated it was with a member of the East Side Kings, a prison gang with significant influence in cell block D. The altercation had been broken up quickly by guards, and no formal disciplinary action had been taken. The complex relationship between Jelani Hightower and Terrell Lyman at Maryland Correctional Institution provided crucial context for understanding the brutal murder that would later unfold. Jelani, a 31-year-old former accountant serving a 6-year sentence for embezzlement since March 2017, maintained a deliberately low profile throughout his incarceration. He avoided gang affiliations and spent most of his time in the prison library or participating in educational programs, earning him the nickname Professor among some inmates. Terrell Lyman, in contrast, had established himself as a dominant presence since beginning his 12-year sentence for armed robbery in November 2015. At 35, the former construction worker from Baltimore had cultivated a reputation for assertiveness and was suspected by prison officials of maintaining connections to an elaborate contraband network within the facility's West Wing. Following the discovery of Jelani's body on July 12, 2020, lead investigator Detective Keyshawn Jakes of the Maryland State Police Homicide Unit immediately began examining the history between the cellmates. Forensic analysis confirmed that Jelani died from blood loss resulting from a severed carotid artery. The medical examiner's report documented 14 distinct stab wounds inflicted by a sharpened toothbrush handle, 9 of which were concentrated around the neck and chest. The pattern and depth of the wounds indicated a frenzied attack carried out with considerable force. The number and concentration of wounds suggest intense emotion behind the attack, noted Dr. Eliza Matsuo in her autopsy report dated July 14, 2020. This wasn't just about killing the victim, but expressing rage. On July 13th, Detective Jakes interviewed inmate Kanaya Haskins, a 42-year-old serving time for fraud who was known to provide information to authorities in exchange for privileges. According to the interview transcript, Haskins suggested there had been a hidden dynamic between Jelani and Terrell. Those two had something going on that nobody was supposed to know about, Haskins told investigators. Could have been romantic, could have been business. But Terrell, man, he's got a temper when he feels disrespected. And lately, something was off between them. When questioned on July 14th, Terrell maintained he had slept through the attack and awakened to find his cellmate already dead. However, investigators noted several inconsistencies in his account. Despite the violent struggle indicated by blood spatter throughout the small cell, Terrell had no defensive wounds. Furthermore, correctional officers described his demeanor immediately after discovery as unusually composed, noting he appeared resigned rather than shocked. Prison administrative records revealed that Jelani had submitted a formal request for cell reassignment on June 23, 2020, citing only personal issues without specific details. This request had been denied due to facility capacity limitations. The timing of this request became a significant point of interest for Detective Jakes, who began exploring what might have precipitated Jelani's desire to change cells less than 3 weeks before his death. Day shift guard Latrice Germain, who had worked in the wing for 7 years, provided additional context during her July 15th interview. Terrell had been more agitated than usual in the weeks before the incident. Pacing more, talking less. Jelani had withdrawn too, stopped going to the library as much. I didn't see any direct threats, but something was definitely different between them. Early physical evidence included a blood-stained cloth discovered hidden beneath Terrell's mattress during the initial cell search. When confronted, Terrell dismissed it as unrelated to Jelani's death, claiming it was from a minor injury he had sustained in the prison workshop days earlier. Laboratory analysis later confirmed the blood matched Jelani's type, contradicting Terrell's explanation. As the investigation progressed, Detective Jakes also identified Jermaine Fulton, an inmate from a neighboring cell block, as a person of interest. Prison records indicated Fulton had a documented grievance with Jelani stemming from an unpaid gambling debt of $340 worth of commissary items. This widened the suspect pool and introduced the possibility that Jelani's death might be connected to broader prison dynamics rather than simply cellmate conflict.
Hear that, youngsters? You can be locked up. You ain't getting no commissary. Your peeps ain't sending you nothing. Ain't nobody on the streets looking out. Your so-called mans and them ain't sending you nothing. So now you borrowing commissary in prison. You don't pay it back and it can cost you your life. Youngsters.
This widened the suspect pool and introduced the possibility that Jelani's death might be connected to broader prison dynamics rather than simply cellmate conflict. By July 20th, 2020, The investigation into Jelani Hightower's murder had taken a significant turn as detectives uncovered evidence of a hidden homosexual relationship between the victim and Terrell Lyman. What began as a standard homicide investigation soon revealed a complex web of intimacy, blackmail, and betrayal that provided a compelling motive for the crime. Detective Keyshawn Jakes, a 15-year veteran of the Correctional Investigations Unit, made a breakthrough when he reviewed the prison's contraband logs dating back 6 months. Through meticulous examination, he discovered a pattern of coded messages exchanged between Hightower and Lyman since February 2020. The messages were strategically hidden within specific library books that circulated between their cell blocks at Eastern State Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania. The notes we recovered told the story of a relationship that was passionate but deeply problematic, Detective Jakes stated in his official report. The messages showed a progression from initial attraction to a power dynamic that grew increasingly toxic. Early notes contained affectionate language and references to secret meetings in the prison laundry facility, but later communications revealed Terrell's growing possessiveness and Jelani's mounting fear. One note recovered from March 2020 read, "You belong to me now. Don't forget who keeps you safe in here." Another message from Jelani dated May 2020 expressed anxiety, "If anyone finds out about us, I'm dead. My cousins on the outside would never accept this." When detectives re-interviewed Darnell Tinsley, Hightower's cellmate, he initially maintained his previous account.
Not only the youngsters hear this, ladies, y'all hear this? Your man that was locked up doing time, better check him out. Do your investigating. You might be sleeping with the diddler.
My cousins on the outside would never accept this. When detectives re-interviewed Darnell Tinsley, Hightower's cellmate, he initially maintained his previous account. After 4 hours of questioning, however, Tinsley reluctantly provided new information. "Look, I didn't want to get involved," Tinsley told investigators. "But yeah, I saw how Terrell acted around Jelani. He'd come by our cell, acting like he was just checking in, but there was something else going on. Once I heard them arguing in the shower room. Terrell was saying something like, 'You think you can just walk away from me?' It sounded like more than just prison politics." Tinsley admitted he suspected a romantic involvement but feared retaliation from Lyman's associates if he spoke up. "And here, knowing too much can get you killed," he explained. Forensic evidence bolstered the relationship theory. The cloth used to strangle Hightower contained multiple DNA samples, with Lyman's being predominant. Additionally, trace amounts of Hightower's blood were discovered on the heel of Lyman's prison-issued shoes, contradicting his alibi of being asleep during the time of the murder. When confronted with this evidence during a second interrogation on July 22, 2020, Lyman modified his story. "Me and Jelani had a close bond, I won't deny that," he stated. "In a place like this, you find connections where you can. But there wasn't anything romantic going on." Lyman then suggested that Jermaine Fulton, another inmate with connections to a rival gang, might have planted evidence to frame him over a dispute regarding contraband distribution. Detective Jakes questioned Fulton the following day. While Fulton denied involvement in the murder, he provided crucial context about the relationship. "Everybody knew what was happening between them two," Fulton stated. "Terrell was using Jelani. Started out protecting him from some guys who had beef with Jelani's cousin on the outside. Then it became something else. Terrell threatened to tell everyone about their situation unless Jelani did favors for him, smuggling contraband, handling payments from outside. Classic prison extortion with a twist." Prison records supported this narrative. An incident report from June 12, 2020, documented Lyman assaulting another inmate who had allegedly made disparaging remarks about Hightower. The situation escalated when Hightower requested a transfer to another cell block 2 weeks before his death, a move that would have distanced him from Lyman's influence. Correctional Officer Latrice Germain provided additional context during her July 23 interview. "Lyman was furious about the transfer request," she recalled. "I overheard him telling Hightower, 'You think paperwork is going to keep you from me?' There's nowhere in this place you can hide. I reported it up the chain, but nothing came of it. We're understaffed and overpopulated. We can't monitor every interaction. By August...
Hear that, youngsters? You on your own when you in there, youngsters. Ain't no guns, your homies ain't around. You in there dolo manolo.
We're understaffed and overpopulated. We can't monitor every interaction. By August 1st, 2020, the investigation into Jelani Hightower's murder had significantly narrowed its focus on Terrell Lyman. Detective Keyshawn Jakes methodically built a case as forensic evidence and witness testimonies began to align against the primary suspect. The forensic analysis proved crucial to the investigation's advancement. The crime lab identified Jelani Hightower's blood on Terrell Lyman's mattress, despite apparent attempts to clean the area. Additionally, a partial thumbprint matching Terrell's was discovered on Jelani's cell door latch, placing him at the scene during the estimated time of death between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. on July 24th. Detective Jakes conducted a follow-up interview with Kanaya Haskins, Jelani's cellmate in Block D, who provided critical new information. Haskins revealed that he had overheard a confrontation between Terrell and Jelani 3 days before the murder. During this altercation, Terrell had made an explicit threat, stating, "You're mine or you're dead." Haskins admitted withholding this information during his initial interview out of fear of gang reprisal, as Terrell was known to have connections to the contraband network within Bay Creek Correctional Facility. When confronted with mounting evidence in his third interrogation, Terrell altered his previous statements. He now claimed that Jermaine Fulton had killed Jelani over an unpaid debt from a gambling dispute. This accusation quickly unraveled when prison records confirmed Jermaine had been in solitary confinement at the time of the murder. Officer Marcus Daniels provided a statement verifying Jermaine's location, effectively dismantling Terrell's attempt to deflect suspicion. The investigation further intensified when Keyshawn questioned Jacob Williams, a known contraband dealer in Bay Creek. Williams reluctantly admitted to supplying Terrell with a modified toothbrush fashioned into a shank approximately 2 weeks before Jelani's murder. Williams explained that he had feared refusing Terrell's request would expose his own illicit operations within the facility. Security footage, though limited in the facility, provided additional contradictions to Terrell's alibi. Available recordings showed Terrell pacing near his bunk at 1:30 a.m., directly challenging his claim of being asleep throughout the night. Guard Latrice Wilson recalled hearing a hushed argument around 2 a.m. but had dismissed it as typical prison discord and failed to report it until questioned specifically about that night. Detective Jakes reviewed Terrell's institutional record, which revealed a pattern of concerning behavior. Terrell had been implicated in 3 previous assaults, all connected to maintaining his status and authority within the prison's social hierarchy. 2 of these incidents involved defending territory against other inmates who had allegedly encroached on his influence. On August 5th, Darnell Tinsley, an inmate housed in the adjacent cell block, provided damaging testimony against Terrell. Tinsley stated that in the weeks preceding the murder, Terrell had boasted about owning Jelani. This statement corroborated earlier suspicions that Terrell had been blackmailing Jelani regarding their relationship, threatening to expose their affair to other inmates who might target Jelani for his sexual orientation. The accumulated evidence painted a disturbing picture of power dynamics and control. Terrell had systematically isolated Jelani from potential allies, established dominance through threats, and ultimately resorted to lethal violence when his control was challenged. The repeated references to ownership in witness testimonies suggested that Terrell viewed Jelani as personal property rather than a human being. On August 10, 2020, Detective Keyshawn Jakes formally arrested Terrell Lyman, charging him with the first-degree murder of Jelani Hightower. The prosecution built their case on the substantial forensic evidence linking Terrell to the crime scene, multiple witness testimonies describing his threatening behavior toward the victim, and the clear pattern of deception in his changing statements to investigators. Following Terrell Lyman's arrest on August 10, 2020, the investigation into Jelani Hightower's murder proceeded with methodical precision to build a case against the primary suspect. Detective Keyshawn Jakes of the Special Investigations Unit led the evidence consolidation phase, bringing together forensic findings, witness statements, and prison documentation to create a comprehensive prosecution package. Forensic analysis confirmed the homemade toothbrush shank as the murder weapon, with laboratory tests revealing both Jelani's blood and Terrell's DNA on the handle. The medical examiner's final report documented 14 separate stab wounds, concentrated primarily in the chest and throat regions, indicating what prosecutors would later describe as a personal attack fueled by rage rather than necessity. Forensic technicians established the time of death between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., aligning with the brief window when security rounds weren't conducted on the east wing of Block C. On August 15, 2020, Detective Jakes secured a formal recorded statement from inmate Kanaya Haskins, who shared a cell block with both men. Haskins detailed a pattern of threats and intimidation from Terrell toward Jelani dating back 3 months. According to Haskins, what initially appeared to be a consensual relationship was actually a sophisticated blackmail operation. Terrell forced Jelani into the arrangement by promising protection from rival gang members, Haskins stated. But really, he was just using Jelani and threatening to have him attacked if he tried to end things. Prison staff discovered additional evidence during a secondary search of Terrell's belongings. Hidden in his pillowcase was a handwritten note in a simple substitution cipher that investigators quickly decoded. Dated July 10, 2020, exactly 1 month before the murder, the note appeared to be from Jelani, pleading to end their relationship. "I can't do this anymore. Someone's going to find out. My family would never understand. Please let this end." The desperation in the message suggested Jelani feared exposure more than physical harm. Detective Jakes re-interviewed Jelani Fulton, the inmate who had provided the initial tip about the shank trade. During this second session, Fulton revealed that Terrell had connections to the East Side Crips and had received orders from outside contacts to silence Jelani. While Fulton maintained he had no direct involvement in the murder, he acknowledged facilitating the weapon transfer, fearing similar retaliation if he refused. A breakthrough came when former cellmate Darnell Tinsley agreed to testify in exchange for consideration in his upcoming parole hearing. Tinsley recounted conversations where Terrell boasted about breaking Jelani psychologically. "He talked about Jelani like he was property," Tinsley stated. Said he enjoyed watching him squirm, knowing he couldn't tell anyone without risking his reputation. Tinsley admitted his reluctance to come forward earlier stemmed from fears of gang retaliation. Administrative segregation, maintaining his innocence during limited interviews. His defense centered on claims that Jelani had attacked him over gang-related disputes and that he had acted in self-defense. However, the absence of defensive wounds on Terrell's body and lack of evidence linking Jelani to rival gang activities undermined this narrative. By October 2020, Detective Jakes had compiled sufficient evidence to work directly with Assistant District Attorney Latrice Germain on preparing the case for trial. Their strategy framed the murder as a crime of control, jealousy, and retribution rather than a random act of prison violence. The evidence tells a clear story of manipulation that ended in murder when the victim attempted to regain his autonomy, ADA Germain noted in the preliminary hearing. The pretrial hearings in November 2020 centered on evidence admissibility, with particular debate surrounding the authenticity of the decoded note and the origins of the shank. Judge Reginald Patterson ultimately ruled in favor of the prosecution on most motions, citing the overwhelming forensic evidence connecting Terrell to the crime scene. The trial of Terrell Lyman for the murder of Jelani Hightower began on January 15, 2022, at the Baltimore City Circuit Court. The proceedings came exactly 18 months after the fatal stabbing that occurred on July 12, 2020, inside the Maryland Correctional Institution. Lead prosecutor Latrice Germain presented the state's case methodically, establishing what investigators had concluded was a clear motive. This murder stemmed from a toxic combination of jealousy and blackmail, Germain told the jury during opening statements. The prosecution's physical evidence was substantial. The handmade shank recovered from the scene contained Terrell's DNA on the handle, while forensic analysis confirmed Jelani's blood on Terrell's prison uniform. Most damning were several notes recovered from Jelani's cell documenting the coercive sexual relationship. Multiple witnesses strengthened the prosecution's case. Kanaya Haskins, who shared a cell block with both men, testified to overhearing Terrell's threats against Jelani 2 days before the murder. He said if Jelani didn't keep quiet about their arrangement, he'd make sure Jelani wouldn't talk to anyone again, Haskins testified. Darnell Tinsley, another inmate, described how Terrell dominated Jelani through a combination of physical intimidation and promises of protection. Jelani Fulton, no relation to the victim, provided crucial testimony about the prison's underground economy. Terrell controlled the shank trade on B Block. Nobody got protection without going through him first, Fulton explained to the court. This testimony established how Terrell leveraged gang connections to isolate and control vulnerable inmates like Jelani. Defense attorney Zuri Haskins constructed a case around self-defense, claiming Jelani had attacked Terrell first. My client was defending himself from an unprovoked attack by a man desperate to escape the consequences of violating gang rules, Haskins argued. The defense suggested Jelani initiated the confrontation, fearing retaliation after attempting to end the relationship. This theory crumbled under expert testimony from forensic pathologist Dr. Marcus Washington, who noted the absence of defensive wounds on Terrell and the angle of Jelani's wounds, indicating he had been attacked from behind. The prosecution also presented a note Jelani had written to his mother the day before his death, expressing fear and asking for help with a transfer request. When Terrell took the stand on February 7, 2022, he admitted to the sexual relationship but claimed it was consensual. According to his testimony, Jelani had lunged at him with the shank during an argument, forcing him to defend himself. Under cross-examination, Prosecutor Germain systematically dismantled this account, highlighting inconsistencies in Terrell's timeline and exposing his connections to the Dead Money Crew prison gang. Terrell's testimony further deteriorated when he was confronted with surveillance footage showing him following Jelani into the laundry area where the murder occurred. Perhaps the most impactful testimony came from Tamaria Fulton, Jelani's mother. She read correspondence from her son detailing his fear of Terrell and the systematic sexual coercion he endured. Her testimony visibly affected several jurors, particularly when she described how her son, serving a 3-year sentence for drug possession, had been transformed from a hopeful young man awaiting release to someone living in constant terror. After 7 days of deliberation, on February 15, 2022, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Raymond Thornton sentenced Terrell Lyman to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and Terrell's lack of remorse. Was transferred to Jessup Correctional Institution to serve his sentence.